Are back. Welcome, Annie.
Hi, nice to be here.
Nice to have you as well. Thank you for joining us on the growth stage. So great to hear. My sound is double, weirdly. Sorry, I'm gonna try to fix it. Do you hear me double?
Yep, I hear you. Is everything
For
working?
me, it sounds very strange. Yeah, I fixed it. Okay, sorry for that. Great to have you, of course. You are currently the strategy director of sustainability and innovation at WongDuty, an info system company. And you'll be bringing 15 years of experience in design-led innovation to this summit with a unique focus on sustainable innovation.
Yes.
I think it's the first keynote to really focus on this angle. So I won't let you wait any longer. And if you're ready, I'd love to pass the mic to you now.
Sure.
Good luck.
I'll take it away. Great, thanks. Yeah, so I have been working on both sustainability and innovation for the last few years. I will talk about my journey on sustainable design, but I hope that it actually applies to anyone working in innovation. I think that we've learned a lot that hopefully will help you in your work, if it's sustainability or just innovation in general. So without further ado, I'll get into it. Just a quick introduction, so just you know where I'm coming from. It's not showing off or anything like that. I have been working over 15 years in digital in both the US and Europe, although more here than there now. I've been here about 12 years. And most of my background is in UX design. And I've led some pretty big digital transformation programs in the past, but my passion is really much more in designing products, especially new innovative products that people haven't seen before or that solve new unique problems, and put some good in the world as well. And I got my first taste of that at bpost as an innovation lead in the Future Lab. And we won a couple of awards in the team, both for innovation and in sustainability. I'll talk a little bit more about the work that we did there. And then at the moment, I am working for WongDuty, and I'm setting up kind of a similar type of practice for Sunrise, which is also a telco in Switzerland. So that's a little bit about me. I've been at WongDuty for the last couple of years, and in that time, I've put together basically two global offerings for them. The first was specifically around innovation and designing new products, services, and business models. And the second one is indeed around sustainability. So I'm going to be kind of drawing from both of those practices today to talk to you about some things that we learned and how they can help in your experimentation as you go forward.
Sorry to interrupt, Annie, but we don't see your slides yet. Just to be sure that everyone can see them.
I'll try again. They show up on my, should I do the entire screen or?
Yeah, normally it doesn't really matter. I would say to try the entire screen, indeed.
How's that?
We can see them now, indeed. Okay. And yeah, perfect.
Great. Okay. You didn't miss much. There wasn't much on the slides that didn't come out of my mouth. But anyway, going back to the practices that I put together for WongDuty, when looking at sustainability, we started looking at the numbers and found that they're actually quite good. You might be surprised. But we found that, companies who invest in sustainability are doing better. Products that go to market do better and sell more. It's great for employee engagement, and there's going to be a ton of investment. So that must mean that everybody is raring to go and doing a ton in this space. And unfortunately, that's not the case. We started looking around and found that actually companies are really struggling to get involved in sustainability or make their strategies stick. So we started looking for problems that we could solve, especially with design. And most of what we were hearing sounded quite familiar. They have a strategy in place, but it's not making it to execution. They're not reaching enough scale in the markets, or they're struggling to maintain long-term change, or they launch something and there's just immediate drop-off rates. Or in some unlucky cases, unintended consequences of new programs that resulted in negative feedback or even backlash. And so we were like, well, a lot of times when we talk to clients about why they thought that they were experiencing these problems, usually the first thing that comes out of their mouth is they blame people. They say our employees don't really care, they're not very invested, so they're not pushing it, and our customers don't really care, they're not really buying it. But we know that that's not true as well. We've seen tons of statistics about the fact that consumers do want to be living more sustainable lifestyles. They're looking for brands to help them to make that easier. So we just didn't really buy the excuse that people don't want this anymore. So we started digging a little bit further into why this might be, and we found a very familiar problem. If you work in in innovation, you've probably noticed sort of this business as usual, where when a company wants to do something first, they do a ton of research and they start with a policy. It's not a bad place to start, but it's a place to start. And policy is great, it can set expectations, but it doesn't really create any sort of path to action on its own. You next need a process. Okay, that enables action, but it doesn't really encourage new behaviors on its own or encourage any real change. Next, they'll look at product, and so they'll kind of put this into practice through their product and make an offering. And products are great. They provide tools for action, but that doesn't mean that people are necessarily going to understand or use them. As human experience designers, we really know that people are the key to making anything work. And as innovation professionals, we've been towing this line for years that you really actually should start with people, experiment there first to inform your product, your process, and then eventually your policy internally. The problem is with sustainability, it's always been kind of a backroom spreadsheet compliance first area anyway. And so that's still kind of the mentality that people have in a lot of businesses. And so we're kind of back to square one, where we're dealing again with okay, everybody's setting policies or ambitions and publicizing those. But then when it comes to actually executing on process, product, and people, they're really lagging behind, and it's taking a really long time to get there. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And we looked at some examples, of where companies are falling short, and we found lots of examples. I'll just talk about a couple quick ones. One is Lego, who actually is doing quite well in the sustainability space. They're using recycled products in their bricks now, and you can recycle them, and you can recycle them as well. That's great. But they want to set up a truly circular model, and they started with a policy internally, and then they put a process into place so their operations are able to sort of use old bricks and turn them into new bricks. They updated their product so that the product and the plastics they use complies with that as well. But then they still haven't figured out how to get people to actually return Legos. And I've asked a ton of people, and no one knows that this is possible, regardless of what market you're in. And so they're kind of they've invested a ton of money into the circular system that's really not working yet. Because they haven't considered people. And then in a worse case, actually, there was this Bags for Life campaign in the UK, and it's everywhere really, but this is where sort of a lot of the negative numbers came from, where pretty much every grocery chain in the UK wanted to sell reusable bags, which is great. So they made a policy, they made a process, they updated their product, and it completely failed in the market to the point where it increased plastic waste coming from these chains by up to 75%. And in some cases, they were actually producing 10 times more plastic waste than they were using disposable bags. And that's because they forgot to design the bags in a way that triggers people to know that they're supposed to do something with it. The bags are designed to be used 10 times, but you wouldn't know that as an average consumer because it looks and feels just like a disposable bag. So these are just a couple of cases where sustainability strategy can backfire. And so we know that it's not easy. We know that experimentation needs to start with people before it reaches the depths of the organization. But when it came to sustainability, there was just something there that felt like a bigger blocker. This isn't quite explaining it fully. There's something more difficult there. And so we started to look at sort of the commonalities and the differences that innovation in general and sustainability strategy have in common. So first, they're both safeguarding the future. That's great. We're going into new territory. Woohoo. Oftentimes we have to get out of our comfort zone. Okay. And it takes a lot of experimentation to get it right. So these are the things that we can kind of bank on when we're thinking about sustainability. If you look just purely at innovation, you can start to see things that make it a little bit easier. often just starts as an extension on a current offering. Or if it doesn't, you can safeguard that by launching under a different brand or using M&A or investments to kind of invest on that side. But there's really like a low risk of backlash. No one's going to get mad at you for trying to innovate. On the other side, if you look at sustainability, oftentimes people feel like, ugh, you're asking me to do something new, or you're asking me to give up my cheeseburgers, or you're going to take away my car. And it sounds really negative. And especially depending on, which market you're in, there's a high risk of backlash, both from people who are politically charged to deny climate change and not want to be more sustainable, or people who are politically charged to be very sustainable, who will criticize any misstep that you take and be very angry at you on Twitter. And so that was basically the thing that laid out our design challenge. So we first wanted to figure out, okay, how might we accelerate sustainable innovation using experimentation, but also address this sort of psychological barriers that consumers have, thinking it's always going to be a negative experience, and also address the organization's fear of backlash for doing it wrong or not doing enough. So we got busy with some partners, and we partnered with behavioral scientists because we felt that that was really kind of a key to solving some of these issues, especially on the consumer side, in terms of lowering psychological barriers. Excuse me. And after some work, months of work, we arrived at sort of a new design toolkit that we call the Sustainable Behavior Design Toolkit. And basically, it starts with making the organization feel a lot more comfortable by finding out and starting with the issues that their customers' employees care the most about. That's the safest path in. It also shows where they make the biggest impact, where it makes sense for them to play. Not everyone needs to be planting trees or should be planting trees. There's lots of different ways that brands can make an impact, and it should be resonant with their brand and their product. And then we started to dig into the consumer side, and we created some tools that helps predict the likelihood that someone will change. So again, we can kind of start with the path of least resistance. We did some behavioral profiling, which I'll go into, which identifies the type of help that they need to change. And then we have a whole toolkit of patterns and UX methods and practices that help us create new sustainable behaviors that are fun to do and also drives long-term habits so that they keep them for life. And so this is what it looks like. There's, well, it's not what it looks like really, but this is the fun slide that shows everything that's contained in it. And we've been using this on a few projects, and I'm just going to kind of go into a couple pieces that hopefully will help specifically in the area of innovating in sustainability and with experimentation and making your experimentation efforts more successful and valuable. And that is basically answering these two key questions. Are you motivated to do this, and would you adopt it long term? Because experimentation is all about answering the costliest questions first, but it's not always just about would you buy this and how much would you pay for it. It's are you actually going to do something about it once we do put this product into market? And this is where on one side we really need to address personality and things that influence someone to do something. And really make up their motivation. And on the other side, how can we actually experiment around building new behaviors, getting someone to try something for the first time, and then getting them to make that part of their everyday lives. So I'm just going to zero in on a few pieces from the toolkit, which should hopefully help. The first one is the likelihood to change measurements. It's really just a series of questions. Like I said, we worked with some behavioral scientists, and they fed us a few of these models that we put into place. So I'm going to, as I go through this, I'm going to show some of these nerdy sort of models, and then how we kind of develop them into actual design tools. I've been told that this audience is full of innovation experts, so I'm going to dive into the geeky stuff. So hopefully you can stay with me on this. But this is actually a really simple model. It's called the theory of planned behavior, and it basically just means if you want to influence or change someone's behavior, you have to address their core attitude about it in the first place. Who's influencing them, whether or not they feel that they have control over the situation. That can actually be quite a big thing, sometimes, especially when it comes to things like sustainability, things like your socioeconomic status has an impact, or, if you've got 3 kids and two jobs, a lot of times you just don't have the mental capacity to feel that you can make changes in your life. So that's a really important one. And those things will basically influence your intentions, which will in turn create new behaviors. So that's the model behind it. And we basically just put together a research tool. I think if you want to, you can use research to get started with. I know in experimentation, we want to move as quickly as possible. You can get a huge amount of information from doing a quick survey or asking people if you have a captive audience as to how they feel about these 3 factors, because then you can really focus on one that might be the weakest. Otherwise, you can just use the model and design for all of them at the same time to make sure that you're covering your bases, basically. But we put together this little survey based on, how do they feel about sustainability? And it's really basic questions, to be honest, about what they see around them and their own abilities to change. So that's the basic building blocks, and we'll revisit the theory of planned behavior as I keep going. But next, we really wanted to understand, okay, so now if we know where we're starting from and how motivated people might be already, what can we do to influence them? And so we started thinking about these behavioral change profiles and how to motivate people and keep them going. And that's where we dug further into motivations and realized that, sure, a lot of, even if people say that they're very motivated by doing good things for the environments and being more sustainable, oftentimes that doesn't mean they'll actually do anything about it. Motivations are complex and often require a lot of different types of motivations. So these are sort of the 4 that we focused in on that we use in a mix. So, being motivated by personal gain and wealth or saving money, there's no shame in that. It's a powerful one. Being motivated by having fun, by pleasure and avoiding discomfort, yes. And being motivated in helping other people. These are all really important things and can help us to kind of use as a springboard towards encouraging more biospheric, that's a nerdy term, biospheric values as well. So when we go back to our 2 questions, are you motivated to do this and will you adopt it long term? We started with the motivation because that's really what gets people going. If you want to influence attitudes, you first start with aligning your value proposition to the existing values that are there. And these are the 3 that I just showed you. So can it save them money? Can it be really fun? Can they help people or do it with people? Start there and then align biospheric values to it. So save money and lower your energy bill, those types of things. And once they start aligning things that make them happy, the traditional values that make them happy, they can start fitting in biospheric values into their lives as well. Next, we look at influences. Humans, we do want to address personal psychology, but humans are extremely social animals, and we probably undervalue how much we are influenced by others. I think we tend to think that our own sparkling personalities are really the basis for most decisions in our lives, and that is not true. You have to show outside influences to make people feel safe about trying new things or building new habits. So you can start with showing social approval. That's other people doing things around them. And then try to align it to their own past behavior. And this is a really important one that the psychologists taught me about. The more that you can align someone with their past behavior, saying like, hey, you've done this before, you can do it again. That is really key to building long-term habits and sort of influencing their personality over time so that they start to, when they see evidence from themselves, they really align with that in their own personality and they become that person. On the other ends, we also want to look at how can people adopt new things long-term. And that's where we're looking at intentions and control. You probably recognize these black boxes from the theory of planned behavior. And so that's how these kind of have morphed and evolved into our design methodology. But on this side, we really want to examine what their intentions are and what their control is over the situation. So if people have a low intention to change, that usually means that they don't think it's going to be easy for them to do, or it's going to be difficult. So you want to just start with making it easy for them to do. That's kind of a no-brainer. And then level up the commitments over time. So to build new behaviors and align them with people's personalities, you can't just start with one and then let it go. You usually need to build it and keep it moving. Otherwise, it'll sort of flatten out and peter out, and they won't stick with it. And then finally, control. If there's something in their lives that's blocking them, 3 kids and 2 jobs, we might not be able to do something about that, but we can at least address those barriers that might be there and include that as part of our experiments or design to give them the space and the control that they need to be able to feel that they can change. And then finally, once that's in place, then you can start to slowly put the user more and more in control of how they do things as they go. So these are some pretty interesting things that you can basically just bake into the value propositions and the concepts that you want to test to not only ensure adoption, but also, see if you can make a product or a new service in the market that people will actually adopt and stick with. So let's talk about the next piece, because this really starts to get it into like the actual design, like how to put this into a journey map, so to speak. And because as designers, we use journey mapping all the time. But when we were looking really at forming habits over long term, we realized that we're still using a very linear journey map with a start and an end. And like the most traditional journey map is usually like attract, and then the final one is sell. But this isn't really the same ball game. So we wanted to kind of make that a more cyclical process that doesn't stop. So we borrowed this model from a book called Hooked by Nir Eyal. Some of you might know it. They mainly use kind of negative addictive patterns to get people addicted to products, which I don't condone at all. But I do think the model can also be used for good. And it works really well with the behavioral model that we put together. Because basically you can trigger new actions by first aligning with people's attitudes about things that they want to do already and showing them the benefits. You can make an intentional action for them, make the action easy to do, and then level up the commitment. So making sure that the actions are always increasing. As part of investment, that's really asking your audience to kind of have some skin in the game. You can remove barriers, and then obviously as a reward, you want to show social approval and how they're kind of improving over time. And so we created some kind of tools that go along with this. One is a pattern library, but the other is just sort of this updated version of a journey map, where we're really examining things not just one time, but how does the first time lead to the second time and the third time and the fourth time, and how might the experience change over time? Now, this can obviously get into this pretty heavy design. So this might come a little bit later in your design process than experimentation. But again, I think it's still something to think about early on when you're first experimenting with new products and services, to make sure that you're not forgetting the customer after the first time they use your product. And I like to call this educated experimentation. Take it for what you will. I know that in experimentation and innovation, we want to move really fast. But if you are working in the space of sustainability in particular, but really anything that might require behavior change, or if you think you're going to ask your customer to do something they might not want to, using these types of tools to do educated experimentation might help you accelerate a little bit faster. I'm just going to show a couple really quick examples of how we've used this. Scone is a local startup, and they help you lower your personal carbon footprint. They actually were really integral in helping us put this toolkit together. In an exchange, we launched some new designs on their app to basically see if we could help people lower their carbon footprint faster. And we designed a few things about attitudes, intentions, control, and influences. But I think the remarkable thing is the outcome. We were focusing on trying to get people to lower their mobility footprints. And after we launched our design interventions, users lowered their carbon footprint by 37%, mobility carbon footprint by 37%. So I think those are pretty profound numbers. It shows that when you consider behavior change in your design, you can make a really big difference. The second example is bpost. This is when I was working with them for the Future Lab. And we were basically setting up, we wanted to solve emission-free last mile delivery. And we chose to launch actually a series of experiments in an eco zone in Mechelen where we could play around with lots of different things. We had a whole city as a sandbox. But one of the key drivers of lowering emissions was switching from home delivery to locker delivery. We found out that you can reduce the carbon footprint of a parcel delivery by 70% if you deliver it to a parcel instead of home. But the big challenge there is obviously how do you switch from the convenience of home delivery to out-of-home delivery? And so we experimented with several things using this model, or actually it really influenced this model in the beginning. But we kind of launched on the basis of convenience and then used marketing in both the vehicles and the lockers to kind of follow up and say, hey, first of all, this is going to be really convenient for you. And second of all, it's really good for the environment. So that's how we kind of aligned the two value structures. In as far as setting up intentions, we've really tried to mimic home delivery as much as possible and change the locker strategy so that the lockers are very close to home. And we use what's called slipper distance. If it's far enough, if it's close enough that you can just put on your slippers and schlep down to the corner and pick up your parcel, then people will probably do it. We also gave the user a lot of control. We ditched the traditional lockers that have a touch screen, which just scares people away and they're always kind of janky and not working. And users can now control the lockers with their smartphone. And then we also gave them some ways to kind of make this a habit by setting it as a default in the bpost app and working with customers like Zalando and other senders to make this either a default or to push it in their checkout process. And after launching that ecozone in Mechelen, 80% of people switched from home delivery to locker delivery, which is quite profound. Emissions decreased by 97%, and the program is now rolling out in Leuven and soon Antwerp, I believe, which will be great. That's where I live. So that's what I had to say. I hope that these little tips and tricks help you in your experimentation, and that you can make some really great sustainable products with them. So I think I will see if there's any questions. Stop sharing.
Hey, Annie.
Hi.
3 minutes before time, so we have time for another question, if you'd like. So we have a question from Renata regarding the unintended consequences of new programs. Mm-hmm. Is it about the backlash or accusations of greenwashing, or does it go beyond that? She gives an example, like the impact on the core business or mm-hmm. products or services not working, etc. It's
both. I mean, in the Bags for Life example, obviously it was just that it didn't work because they didn't test with users and make sure that they understood that they're supposed to do something different with that bag. In other cases, there's been some pretty big backlash against companies like BP who are trying, who launch marketing campaigns to try to make people more aware of energy use, but are accused of greenwashing or putting, too much blame or responsibility on the side of the customer when they should be doing it. So it's kind of a minefield. I acknowledge that. But I don't think that should stop brands from experimenting. In fact, I think that makes it even more important for them to experiment first and early before launching campaigns that might, be quite tone deaf or in some cases make the problem even worse.
Okay, perfect. I think, Renata, that answers your question. If someone would happen to have another question in like the 30 seconds following, we could still ask that.
I saw that my QR code doesn't work. It's just my LinkedIn profile, so just find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. So I will already say to everyone that they can enjoy a coffee in a minute. It's the coffee break. You can also join one of our partners in one of the rooms, the Cosmos Collective room, to have a sparring partner about business challenges you're facing or any problems you might have, and he might help you out with it. Make sure to check out the booth as well. And for the rest, I wish you a good pause. Take a second, make yourselves comfortable, and we will see you again for another session in about half an hour, in about a quarter of an hour. Sorry. Thank you very much, Annie.
Take care. Bye-bye.